Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders by helping you improve performance using process improvement solutions with bottom line results. My name is Patrick Adams, and this season I'll be joined by three other amazing hosts, including Catherine McDonald from Ireland, Andy Ulrich from Australia, and Shane Doffenbaugh from the United States. Join us as we bring you guests and experiences of lean practitioners from all over the world. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. My name is Patrick Adams, and I am joined by another host, Catherine McDonald, for the Lean Solutions Podcast. Today, it's just me and you, Catherine, so I'm excited for this conversation. You and I have been talking a little bit just about our past guests and having some really good conversation about what that experience has been and how our different guests have brought lots of different strengths, but also we've been able to identify some gaps in what our guests or the different people, even clients that we've worked with, have been struggling with. So we started to have that conversation, Catherine, and I just wanted to maybe open it up and have this conversation live in front of the audience for this episode. So it'll be a little bit different for our audience, but Catherine, before we dive in, welcome back to the show here, and excited to chat with you.
Hi everyone. Hi Patrick. Yes, it's very strange being back on this side. Are you sure now, Patrick? You don't want to swap? I'm quite happy to do the interview now. I'm getting very comfortable.
Oh, sure. No, we can. We'll do a little catch ball back and forth.
Yeah.
You ask me some questions, I'll ask you some questions, and I think at the end of this, it'll be a lot of value add, good content for everyone.
Okay, let's do that.
Good. So, Catherine, we had some conversations before we hit record, and we've had some conversations with the other hosts as well, Shane and Andy, around just as we're bringing guests on, we're starting to hear kind of some repeat things, and maybe even identify some gaps or some things that maybe aren't being talked about, or repeat struggles, things like that. And so what are some of the things that you've seen in just the last few months of recording with some of our guests?
Yeah. So if I think back just even on season 3, one of the things I've noticed about a lot of the guests we have on is their passion for lean combined with their ability to actually turn and transform organizations into lean organizations. And we know that that's not easy. We've worked in the area ourselves for long enough. We've worked with managers who struggle with this. So I was really thinking to myself, well, what is it they have? And I think one of the behaviors that I would describe that our guests as having would be something called strategic influence. Yeah. So strategic influence, I think the reason that our guests have it, and I think the reason any great leader has it, is it's something that starts from within yourself. So It's a belief in something, in an idea or in an improvement, and it's something that you are so passionate about that you can't help but influence other people to see what it is and learn all about it and do something different. So that's kind of what I see. So if you want to talk about that for a few minutes, I can kind of elaborate on that and talk about, because actually I think it's a really important trait in anybody who goes about, transforming an organization or bringing in any sort of lean intervention.
Sure. No, I think that's a great topic for today. And obviously, I think there are obviously the people that we've had on, the different guests that we've had on, they have influence within the organizations that they're working with. Some of them are authors, some of them are consultants, some of them are internal lean practitioners within their organizations, or supervisors, plant managers, whatever it may be. But they have some form of influence. So I like the term strategic influence, and I'm interested to hear a little bit more about that. Can you expand on that? Talk to us about what exactly is strategic influence, and also, like I said, the guests that we've had on have a level of influence. Do all of our listeners have some form of strategic influence, or can they develop that? What does that look like? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so I think that's something maybe people need to ask themselves as I go through what strategic influence is, and just maybe question themselves to see, do they have it? Do they need to develop it? What is it they're doing that is working well in terms of influence? And maybe what are the gaps? Okay, so when we talk about strategic influence, what we're talking about is setting up, really planning ahead, setting up opportunities for people and teams to think differently. So it's not an ad hoc approach to change and improvement and wanting things to happen and, you know, having side chats with people. It's a really intentional effort to get something across the line. Okay. And really it's required, I guess, in any team, department, organization at any level. And it can happen maybe at the start of something when, you know, we're trying to get people to see the benefits of changing, or maybe it can happen when we're in the midst of change, or we think we are, and people have maybe agreed to this change and improvements and doing things differently. But maybe when it comes down to it, their habits and behaviors get in the way, and actually they're really struggling with change. Okay, so that's where strategic influence comes in, and setting up these kinds of opportunities for people to develop and to learn and to actually understand how and why they need to change. So that's really what it is. And I would always describe it as, I guess, modern leadership, because if you think about it, old style traditional leadership that we often talk about is very much a push system. It's very much, you know, I'll tell you what to do, or that it's the leader's job to tell people what to do. But these days, I think it's very much about asking people, you know, showing respect for people, involving people in change and improvement, and really trying to stay away from telling as much as possible. So that's where this whole skill of strategic influence comes into play.
I love it. And I love that you use the word intentional, because it's not like you can just go out there and just, you know, just kind of ad hoc or just hope that you're going to do the right things. There's some planning, there's some strategy, there's some intentionality that goes behind this. You have to know your people well enough. You have to also know where you're going. You have to understand your struggles, your challenges. One of the things that I talk about in my book is flexibility of mind, that leaders need to also be willing to, and again, it's an intentional action, but be flexible with how they approach every situation. Things change constantly. And if we get into this mindset where we're just set in our ways and we're stuck, and this is the way I lead, and this is the way I teach, and this is the way we're going, and nothing is going to ever change from that, well, that becomes very difficult for teams to be able to adapt to that, or it's the leader, I think, that needs to be willing to adapt, to be flexible in how they approach the team. And it sounds like that's a big piece of this as well. Would you agree?
Oh, huge. Adaptability is huge within this. So even though we can see that something needs to change and improve, it doesn't mean that we have all the answers in terms of how. It's so important that we get that piece right. That it's so, for example, if, you know, if you are a new manager and you've taken on a new team, and I've seen this happen myself, it's happened to me as well myself, and we go in and we see, okay, nice team, good team, performing well, everything seems okay, you know, the job looks okay, the team seem to be getting on well, but we can see that the team are probably capable of doing more than they are in terms of what they're producing, you know, how they're working together, what they're delivering. And you know, we can see that there's definitely potential there individually and as a team, but yet we can feel that there's this sense of comfort within the team, and you know, people seem happy. So that's often a dilemma for managers and leaders. You know, how do we work with teams and build trust and get to know the team and keep everything hunky-dory within the team, but yet at the same time, you know, get change and improvement happening and get people doing something differently, you know? So that's kind of a common example of what a manager needs to do. And if we go in and we tell people what to do, we break that trust, you know? There is no relationship. It's a very one-sided relationship. And we need two-sided relationship all the time with our teams. So strategic influence is about creating that pull, you know, shining the light on the opportunity and pulling people towards it and getting people to want to change and changing with them, as opposed to being the one telling them what to do.
Sure. Now let's take this and we're going to break this down for our listeners. So to hang with us here, because we are going to break this down into some rules that Catherine has put together that kind of help to lay some guidelines behind this. But before we do, I want to talk a little bit more about for those of us that are working in organizations where we've adopted lean as our business system. You know, we're committed to continuous improvement as the way that we manage. And so I want to know, how does this fit in helping to enhance the adoption and the implementation of lean practices, of lean thinking into organizations? Where does this piece come in and actually help to support that?
Yeah, good question. Okay, so if you think about it, what can go wrong, and from everything we've heard from our guests as well, what can go wrong in lean is this idea that it is this big shiny thing that we introduce into teams. We bring in the tools, we explain, we're going to use these tools, everything's going to change, we're going to become more efficient. All we have to do is do X, Y, and Z. And we know that that doesn't work. So we know that there's a piece of work, almost groundwork, that we have to do with the team and with people and with the culture of the organization to ensure that people are ready to change, and we're not forcing change on them. So we want them to be willing to change. So a big part of using strategic influence to, I suppose, help with the adoption of lean is to show what lean can do for your business first and foremost. And I think it was Ryan Tierney's example of that really struck with me in terms of how he displayed those competencies within his team when he was on the Lean Solutions podcast. So I remember him saying he just found lean himself, and he was blown away by this whole concept, but he started watching videos and reading up and just filling his brain to the brim about lean and becoming really knowledgeable on that. And what he did was he brought information into his team and he showed them, look at these videos, look at what lean can do. So he provided the rationale, and he got people excited about it without ever telling them to do something differently. So I think that's where strategic influence comes in at the very start of any sort of lean adoption or any sort of lean transformation. It's really getting people to understand it and how it can benefit the business, and getting excited about it yourself. That's a huge thing as a leader, or even just someone in an organization who wants the organization to be lean. It's just getting excited about it yourself. And that's part of influence. Part of influence is how you speak about something, the passion, that you speak about it. So yeah, I think Ryan's example was really, really good there. And then as we go through, obviously, lean, I suppose the work you have to do to embed lean in an organization, whether that's value stream mapping, process mapping, whether it's Kata, whether it's Kaizen, whatever it is that we then set up in terms of the management systems and structures to help embed lean, we can come to any sort of a point where people can become a little bit resistant, or maybe they are agreeing to change, as we said earlier, and not actually changing. And then that's again where we have to come in and we have to really get to know people, get to know their motivations, and then we use our influence to help those particular people or teams actually make the changes. So it is about, again, relationships. It comes back to, I guess, you can't influence without relationships.
Absolutely. I love that. And that definitely helps to give us some framework around this. So let's actually break it down now in a little bit more detail, because you actually teach your clients 5 rules for strategic influence. And so I want to kind of walk through these. You already kind of started to touch on the first one, which is show, not tell. And I want to hear a little bit more about that. And I think I might have an example too that may be able to help with this based on just what you just said. So tell us a little bit more about the first principle, show, not tell.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so show, not tell, I suppose, as it suggests, is about not telling people what to do. It's about leading the way. It's about standing up and walking the path yourself and putting yourself in people's shoes. And it's about understanding people's maybe reservations or feelings about change. And then it's about going out, trying something and showing people how it worked out for you, as opposed to going and telling somebody to do something that maybe you've never done or they don't see you doing. So that's really, really important when it comes to change and improvement. You've probably seen that, Patrick, that's, works when it comes to whether it's a new team or whether it's an existing team. That approach works with the team, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the couple of things that came to mind while you were talking, the empathy, right?
Yeah.
So putting yourself in the shoes of the people that you're leading, or the people that you're working with, your peers, or even the people that are leading you. I mean, putting yourself in their shoes and really understanding the things that they're dealing with, or the feelings that they have, or the why that they might have, I think is key to that, based on what you just said. And then the other piece that came to mind was leading from the front, being willing to do what it is that you're asking your team to do, right? And to your point, showing, cutting the path, showing them the path, and I just thought about, so the example that I mentioned earlier, I've talked about this example in the past, but when I was in Marine Corps boot camp, the drill instructors in the Marine Corps are pretty hard on you. And as you can imagine, but during, when we were issued our M16A2 service rifle, the first thing that they did was taught us how to break it down. And then they also impressed on us the importance of keeping our rifles clean. And the thing is they didn't just scream at us and yell at us and tell us how to clean the rifles, right? They actually took it apart themselves. They huddled us around. They showed us which areas needed to be cleaned, why they needed to be cleaned. They showed us, and also spoke from experience, from their own experience of when they had rifle jams and when they had things happen to them because they didn't clean the rifle properly. So they used real examples. They showed us how to do it. They explained the why behind it. And then it was time for us to actually do it. And it was a lot easier for us to understand a lot of what they were asking us to do after they had showed us. So I just thought that was a good example as you were talking in my personal experience of what I've seen for that first rule of show and tell. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect example. I mean, absolutely. I think that's kind of the mentoring role that we're talking about there as well, of managers. And we talk an awful lot about mentoring and coaching and when to use it, and what the differences are. And I think when you are sort of establishing, a team and trying to drive team performance, the first thing you do is you apply that sort of mentorship piece, whereby you're there for people, especially if they're new and young, so you give them guidance. You don't put them in positions where you expect them to do something that they don't know how to do it. So this whole idea of developing people and sharing your own, expertise, and tips and tricks and whatever it is, that's such an important part to get people to the point where they feel confident and comfortable and skilled enough then to maybe participate at a different level, or a deeper level, which we'll talk about, as the steps go on. But absolutely, I think that sort of mentorship piece is really, really key. There is another piece to that as well, that kind of show, not tell. And sometimes I think that this part is missing as well in organizations. So I think sometimes managers think they have to be the ones to do all the showing. And it's not always the case. I think sometimes not all the time in teams, we've got, great resources and great knowledge that isn't shared well enough. So people do things in their own way. And, maybe one person is more productive than another. And that person who's productive doesn't really talk to the other person who's really struggling, So great managers, when they have their one-to-ones, they can figure out what's happening pretty quickly in a team, and they can see where's that sort of lack of shared knowledge. And I think one thing that great leaders do, and this can really help when it comes to, the lean side of things as well, and bigger changes. One thing they do is bring people together to facilitate that kind of shared learning. So if they see a pattern of, let's say, productivity being low, targets, not being hit, actions not being done, accountability low, they'll bring people together and they'll just sort of even informally bring up these topics and say, let's have a knowledge sharing session. Let's talk about, how we work, and let's share our tips. So I think it doesn't always have to be your experience. You look at what you have within the entire team and you get people sharing collaboratively. So I think that's another important part.
Love it. Love it. Thanks for sharing that. So rule number two is to celebrate the small stuff. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it is as it suggests, but it's something that not every manager does. So even, and when I say all the small stuff, I mean all the efforts, not just the, I suppose, accomplishments. So when somebody does turn around and try something different, regardless of the outcome, the first response should be, brilliant, well done for trying. That's okay. We'll go back to the drawing board. We will work on what it is we need to do differently, but I see you trying, and that's fantastic. It shows me that you're committed to this. It shows me that you're interested. So as much support as you can, especially for people who find it difficult to change, or who are just not used to doing something in a different way. So definitely celebrating all the little things. And I know there's a saying out there, catch people doing something right. And I think that's really important. And I would just add to that and say, just catch people trying things, not just doing something right, but just catch people trying things new and say, wow, tell me about what you're trying there, instead of maybe the old traditional style where we're used to saying to people, what are you doing there? That's not in the policy, So I think we have to get used to the fact that, companies have to be innovative and creative going forward. And if we stifle people's opportunities to try something without trying to understand it, we're missing a trick, So celebrate all the small things and all the small efforts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important one. It helps to create the type of culture that is because they're going to if leaders are doing it, if leaders are celebrating the small things, and if leaders are noticing those things, then other people will do the same. So it starts to spread. People, like ripples, right? So people start to, if they're constantly hearing from their leaders that they're doing this good, or great job there, or thank you for trying that, then it will then start to ripple over into their conversations with some of their peers or the people that report to them. And that, again, starts to create that culture that we want, where people feel safe to try things, where they feel safe to experiment. There's no fear of failure. They know that if they try something and it doesn't work out the way that they expected, they're still celebrating the fact that they tried. And so you're developing that culture that is going to help support a continuous improvement direction. Hey everyone, I am sorry to interrupt this episode of the Lean Solutions podcast, but I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to our company, Lean Solutions. We exist to empower and equip people for positive change. We do this through our 3 pillars, which include training and development, coaching and consulting, and talent solutions. Whether you have specific areas for improvement, or you're not really sure where to start, we can build tailored solutions and provide resources to meet your needs. Send us an email at office@findleansolutions.com to begin your journey towards transformation. Now, back to the show. Rule number 3 is to involve people. This is obviously a big one when we think about, the lean principles. One of those principles is respect for people. So involving people in decision-making, involving people in improvement events or activities, involving people in daily management, involving them in the celebrations. I mean, I think that's what you're talking about here, but help us to kind of learn a little bit more, and maybe, I don't know if you have any examples of what that might look like, but expand on this one a little bit.
Yeah. So if you think about the steps so far, the first step is really, especially if you have new people or inexperienced people on your team, you mentor them, you show them the way, you show them as many times as they need to, so they feel confident about things. And that's really important. It's a hugely important part of leadership, as we said. The second step is to celebrate that and to help them feel safe, and then help them to maybe move outside of doing what you showed them, if you know what I mean. So it's about, catching them, as we said, trying something different and telling them it's okay to do that and it's okay to make a mistake and let's understand it. But eventually we need to move on from that as well. So we need to move on from telling people, this is how I have done things in the past, maybe, you could try this. So we need to start kind of shifting a little bit as we get to know people and as people become more confident in our teams. So we need to maybe move from the mentoring towards the more coaching piece. And what this next step means in terms of getting people involved, it's about, as you said, hearing their voices, involving their voice in the decision making. Instead of maybe them hearing your voice, you want to hear their voice a bit more. So again, it comes down to, this is very much overlapping with how we talk about lean and the right way to do lean, in terms of involving people in things like mapping out processes and talking about what happens day to day in their job, and understanding from their perspective how things could be done better. So it's very much about moving now towards a more kind of structured and a little bit more formal way of involving people in change and improvement. But at this point, people should be ready for it if we have trained them in the right way to begin with and help them feel confident. So we're hoping that people will be ready now to kind of take part in these sorts of activities. So yeah, I mean, it could be anything. Don, I think it was Don Watts that talked about people first, and he talked about kata coaching, and he talked about how simple it is if you really just think about it. Just stop and, down tools, involve people, brainstorm with people. Don't expect them to come in and just do their work day to day and work off a list and tick boxes and go home at the end of the day, So it's about involving people. And really, if we want change and improvement, and we want better products and services to come out the other end and happier customers, we've got to have happier, more engaged employees. So we absolutely have to get to this stage where they feel they have control and ownership over what they do, and that their work is valuable, and they understand the purpose, and they're contributing to all of that. So this step is really, really, really important. So, I mean, yeah, I think all of the lean approaches and techniques that we use help with this as well. So we're using strategic influence as we're using the tools and techniques. So they definitely overlap there.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think to your point, this is definitely one of the more important aspects. I've talked a lot about creating the right type of culture. I mean, this one is huge. Because I've worked at organizations, and I've worked with organizations where, people do come in, they punch a clock, they run a machine. At the end of the day, they go home. You can tell that there's not a lot of excitement in the people. They're not very talkative. They're not, they're very kind of withheld to themselves. And that's not the type of culture that we're trying to create. The kind of culture that we're trying to create is one where people are excited to come to work, where they're looking forward to being able to solve problems, for example, right? We don't want one sole problem solver, one manager that goes around and solves the problems for everybody. We want an army of problem solvers, people that are excited when they can experiment and try things that are going to help remove some of the headaches that they're having or some of the problems that they're experiencing, and allow them the opportunity to experiment and try things differently, right? So that they can use some of their creative juices to actually create success in the work that they're doing. And that's the kind of culture that we're trying to create. So, involving them is so imperative, and that takes, we talked about this in the beginning, but it takes intentional action. You can't just sit in your office and hope and think about how to make it happen. You have to, as a leader, you have to go out and intentionally involve people in experiments. You have to ask them, when are we running the experiment? When can I come back out and see how the experiment went? What did you learn from that experiment? What are you going to do next? Right? Those are the types of things as leaders that we have to be out there and really encouraging and using intentional actions to involve people in the work that's happening.
Yeah, 100%. And it is about that. It's about getting out there and doing it with people. And that has a kind of a knock-on effect as well, in terms of developing the leadership abilities within the team to do that for themselves without the leader being there. So, we've talked about the differences before. Was it Phil Rank that talked about the difference between leaders and leadership? And that what we're trying to do is move away from this idea of the leader being the one to drive everything and drive everyone. But it's about setting up these systems, whether it be daily huddles in the morning, and having a structure around that, and having great questions and a great simple agenda that people follow. And then, you have your root cause analysis, you have your boards, you have a system in place to do all of these things, so that when the leader does maybe start it off and show people how to do it, that the leader can also delegate it to somebody else in the organization who can lead it, and they can delegate it to somebody else. And as you said, we need to be able to do that then too, so that we have a whole army of problem solvers, because that's what makes the best organizations.
Yeah, so true, so true. Okay, so now rule number one, we show and tell. Rule number two, we celebrate the small stuff. Rule number three, we involve people. Now we're to rule number four, which is connecting the dots. So tell us a little bit more about this one. What does it mean to connect the dots?
Okay. So we might have thought that the previous step was the most important step when we were on that step, but it's not. The most important step is this step, which is connecting the dots. So if you think about it, if we have all these great ideas and great intentions and great actions, and people are going out and actually doing something differently, we tend to celebrate and go, yes, we've done it, we've got it across the line, right? But what happens most of the time is people will try something, maybe it won't go to plan, maybe it will, but maybe we don't follow up, maybe we don't know, maybe we don't have data on it, maybe we don't ask. So we don't know. People made the change, but so what? So what happens? People go back, revert back to old habits, and things just fall back to the way they were. I've seen it over and over again, from the simplest things to an organized workspace and tidy desk, to the much bigger processes that involve production and operations. So I've seen it so many times where we don't connect the dots for people. What that means is we need to show people the impact of the change, and we need to on a couple of levels. We need to help them understand that what this means for themselves. That question, what's in it for me? We have to bring that back to people to help them to understand, look how much the impact of making this change, going out and making this tweak, doing this differently. Look at the impact that had on you. You were able to finish up your work early, this week. You were able to leave, whatever it was, half an hour early. You had less errors and defects to follow up on, less stress. Whatever it is, bring it back to the person. Then we need to look at also the different levels. What's in it for the customer? What's in it for the team? What's in it for the organization? And we need to make sure we set up the systems right in the first place to capture the data, to ask the right questions, get the answers, and then be able to present it back to people in a way that shows them, that connects the dots for them to see, now I understand why there was such a big push on this change, and why Catherine was so, passionate about this change being needed, So then it makes people much more likely to get involved in the next piece of work, and so on and so on. So people get more used to change and improvement when they can, when we can connect the dots for them, because not everybody has the ability to do that themselves. They need to be shown. So and I think there's plenty of ways to do that. I've worked, lots of the organizations I work with use an Obeya room. They have a lean room, they have a lean wall, and they put up the charts, the graphs, the metrics, and they gather people around regularly to say, well, look, we tried this, so here's what's happening as a result. So, our sales are gone up, our complaints are gone down as a result of making this change, whatever it might be. Simple other things, dashboards, visual management, but visual management is obviously key here. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other piece of that is once you've connected the dots, and these people, see the connection and they understand it, and they've been part of it. I love to do best practice sharing between departments or areas of the business, or even bringing in people from the outside to come see. And I always encourage the team members who were involved in whatever that improvement or that change or whatever the experiment or whatever they were able to do, to be the ones that are actually talking to the group about, what they did. So here was the problem we experienced. Here's some experiments that we ran. Here's what we learned. Here's the solution. And, the excitement is just like pouring out of them, right? Because they were able to accomplish something. And it's not me that's telling the group, it's the people that actually did it. And when groups are sharing like that, and they start to get into this mode of feeling comfortable with doing that. Not everybody's comfortable, speaking in front of groups and things like that. So some of this you have to be careful with, but once people start to feel more comfortable and they're able to do that, then it's no longer the push of me pushing this trying to push this continuous improvement culture on people, but now it's like it's become its own animal, and it's growing on its own, and people are sharing and excited, and they own it, right? They're the ones that are owning it. And so again, that just starts to support that, continued development of the culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah, that's developing people for
Oh
sure.
yeah, absolutely.
And that is what it's all about, 100%, because then once people are confident and engaged and excited, they will look for more opportunities for change, and that's what we want. It's not all down to, we might have brought in an idea or floated something with the team, but this is where we want to get to, here where people are connecting the dots and getting excited once they see the dots connected. So that's really why I think this step is actually, okay, maybe they're all important, but once you get to this point, you realize that now this is what we need to make the most important step right now is doing this. And that needs to be done very frequently, not just once a year, not just going back over our goals once a year and seeing the things that we've done, and you've lost it by then. It needs to be every week or at least twice a month, where you go in and you talk about the connections, the impact of the work we're doing. It has to happen. So rather than jumping on to the next shiny thing or the next project, and people might feel then, oh gosh, like this all it is, it's just jumping from one shiny project to the next shiny project. And okay, great, I feel, I'm engaged in it, I'm involved in it, but what's it all for? So it's really important regularly that we do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this brings us to the last rule number 5, which is to be there for your people. Now, I've talked to leaders that are like, oh, of course I'm there for my people. Of course I'm there. I support them. But we're talking about intentional action, right? Not something that just happens. So what does this look like? Unpack this one for us, because it's a little bit more complicated than just saying, yeah, I support you guys. I'm there for you.
Yeah.
There's more to it than that, right?
Yeah, oh, definitely. So leaders need to be able to manage their time to make time for people, right? That's the first thing. If you don't make time and manage yourself and your own systems properly, you won't have time to go out and spend time with people. So I would always look to work with people and look at their time management, first of all, to see where is your time going and how much of your time is actually being spent with the people doing the work. So that's the first thing, making time for people. When you have time, then you have to invest it wisely and make sure that that time that you have with people is very valuable. I would always encourage people to have one-to-ones and to have them at least, 2 a month, whereby obviously it depends on your team structure, but maybe that sometimes needs work too. But keeping teams small enough so that every person can have a one-to-one with their manager, I think that's hugely important. And within that, there's very, coaching skills come into play here. So we need to be able to ask powerful questions. We need the active listening skills, the coaching skills to be able to ask meaningful questions, to really understand how people are feeling about the work and about everything that's going on. So we need to get underneath the surface. So when I say, be there for people, it's not, the informal is brilliant. Gemba walks, checking in with people. Absolutely. That's one side of it, which is also important. But the second side is most definitely getting to know people, not being afraid to ask the questions and maybe put yourself out of your comfort zone, and to really, I suppose, be okay to deal with emotions, and to ask about emotions. And when I'm explaining this to managers, I always use Vygotsky's learning development model. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, I won't go through the whole thing, but basically what it says is that when people are in their comfort zone, so they're used to doing things for a long time, and they're doing it in a certain way. And when things change and they agree to maybe try something different, they don't go straight into that learning zone of how to do something different. They have to pass through what's called the fear zone. Mm-hmm. So one of the main responsibilities and jobs of the leader of that team is to go into that fear zone with people, because every single person goes through it when they try something new and different. Anybody who says they don't, it's not true. Some people just spend longer in it than others, or they feel the fear a bit more than others, but everybody goes through it. So the leader's job is to really be there for people, to understand their reservations, their fears, their challenges, especially when it comes to doing something new, to have those conversations and to come out the other end very clear on both sides as to how we're going to maybe do things differently, or what can you do that will make the 1% difference that will make this easier for you, you know? So it's not all about the leader taking on the actions, it's about helping the person to see how they can handle these challenges better. So again, getting to know people and all the time applying our emotional intelligence and our empathy.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. As you were kind of wrapping up there, I was thinking about a gentleman that I worked with in a manufacturing plant, and he was very on the outside, very like came across to be very hard and tough, and didn't want to, or said he didn't want to be involved in any of this stuff, and just leave me alone. I just want to run my machine, right? And I remember, like, inviting him to be part of discussions and things, and he would just stand in the back with his arms crossed and didn't want to say anything and was just very quiet. And I remember one day, one-on-one, which you mentioned, and very key, this is important. One-on-one, I was having a conversation with him at his machine, and I asked him, what are some of the things that bug you about, running this machine? Because it's dark over here, it's dirty. I mean, I feel like I have a few things that I'd like to fix. And so I asked him that, and he said, well, yeah, I mean, there's some leaks under the machine, and I hate that every morning I got to come in and I got to mop because there's a bunch of crap underneath my equipment and things. And so I said, well, what do you think we should do? What do you think we could do? And so he hem-hawed around a little bit, and then he said, well, I've been wanting to do this, or I've asked so and so to do this, and nobody ever did anything, and just complaining, whatever, normal stuff. But or for him it was normal, but and then he came up with a thought that he said he had tried before or whatever, or had asked for help. And I said, well, let's try that. Let's do that. What can I do to help you? And he said, well, I would need this, or I need that. And so, immediately I went and grabbed what he needed. And, like, to your point, worked alongside him, and I worked through that whole process with him to the point where at the end we came out with a solution to this problem that he had been dealing with. And then we celebrated that. And I wasn't celebrating my involvement in the situation. I was celebrating what this gentleman had done, and the idea that he had and how he had solved that. And you could see the toughness like falling off of him, where and that's just one very small piece. And sometimes with some people it takes months or even years of doing that, but it's intentional action that will move people in the direction of involving themselves in continuous improvement without even knowing it, right? I mean, he said he didn't want anything to do with it, but the moment that you ask him what bugs him, and what do you think we could do about it, and how can I help you? And then I walked with him through that, and then celebrated it on the other end. He's involved in continuous improvement and doesn't even know it, and he loves it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that as leaders we have to be looking for, those opportunities, and walk through these rules intentionally, not walking away from this, but really seeing the opportunity to work and develop people, and then taking that opportunity and being intentional to follow through with it.
Yeah, 100% exactly. And really it is about making the time to go out there and to, like you said, not be in a rush to go back to something, having that space and that time to give to people where they feel you're there for them. You're not checking your watch and saying, I have to go in a minute now, I have a meeting. I can't remember where I heard it, but where did I read this? I can't remember. But anyway, it was about a guy, and he was on his way to a meeting. Was it you talking about this or somebody? And in the meeting, the meeting was pretty important people, let's say, sitting around waiting for him. But the guy on the way to the meeting saw that somebody was struggling with something on a line. So he stopped and went to the line. Instead of going to the meeting, he went and helped the person on the line. And then he was probably half an hour late to his meeting, and he walked in and he said, they said, where were you? And he said, well, I was doing what was more important, which is a total shift in thinking. The people who are doing the work take priority, not a meeting, So I can't remember. You did.
I think that was Don Watsa. I think that was the stories that he told us. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I thought that's really struck with me, and I just felt that that's the way to do things.
I love it. It's a good way to close us up for the day.
Yeah.
And I appreciate this conversation. I'm glad. I mean, I love to have guests on, don't get me wrong. But sometimes it's nice to just have a conversation between, the hosts about some of the things that we're hearing and experiencing through the conversations that we're having with our guests. And for anyone that's listening in, if you are hearing a pattern, or if you're hearing or not hearing a topic that you would like to hear about, something that's bothering you, or something that you would like to hear some insight or some expertise on, shoot us an email and let us know, what those topics are, because we would love to find a guest or just have a conversation amongst the hosts around that particular topic. So yeah, so again, Catherine, I appreciate the conversation. I love this idea of strategic influence, and how, as leaders, we should be very intentional about how we approach people development, and the result of that the results will speak for themselves. Catherine, it's been great. Have an amazing week, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Patrick. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.